I'm Dorothy Rowe, and the video you're about to watch is a clip from a live webinar. If you enjoy the content of this video, please like and subscribe. I'd love to hear your comments. Thank you. This very deep thinker said, how best to approach the nervous system when it appears damaged by PTSD? When I look at this, one of the things that I see is a pattern like a vicious cycle that somehow within at some kind of like deep sort of fundamental formative level of the self, processes that are actually supportive of evolution and good, somewhere along the line get labeled as bad. And the net result is then that that seed of like, oh, this good evolutionary protective mechanism is bad, it gets deep down in the fabric of the deeper levels of consciousness. And then it's as if the system is self-sabotages. The problem is that the seeds of imbalance usually are so subtle, they're so abstract. They can sometimes get caught in the system like at a very early age, for example, that we don't tend to access them through the normal channels of like thinking. They sit like deeper than thinking. Then what happens is all the structure of the way we function gets built up on top of those seeds. And we find that the system just tends to react and respond to environmental cues and to life experience in certain ways. And the mechanics of that are very spontaneous and it seems as if the mechanism itself is kind of inaccessible, right? It's just like, oh, well, like in this person's case, with the nervous system, this idea of having the PTSD kind of stuck in the system. And so it just seems like spontaneously one just has these sort of like unhealthy reactions to triggers that don't seem to really be necessarily bad enough to have such an unhealthy reaction. In this case, energy healing arrives as a tool to dig down and somehow get to that seed and figure out what is that aspect of evolution that has somehow been defined as a no-no, basically. And when I look at that, what I see is it's the purification process, because that's the one that gives us the most trouble. I'm looking again, though, for this person and for PTSD in general. I'm seeing something else. The cycle of creation. There's that expansion from the ocean of being up to the surface. Then there's this process whereby, something has been created, it's fully formed. And I have a rock here. This lovely rock has been fully formed. And then after it's fully formed, there's a reflection between the surface of creation and the source of creation. Being looks at the rock and says, okay, I created this in my own image. I created this to be an innocent, pure reflection of my nature. But it's not exactly right. It's not exactly a perfect reflection of my own nature. I mean, how can anything at the relative be a perfect reflection, right? So then what happens is whatever aspects of it that are not a perfect reflection have to be purified out. And whatever aspects of it that are a really beautiful, perfect reflection, some of these shapes are just lovely. I love some of these shapes in here. This little cute shape right there. They can stay, and then they become integrated. And what I see happening for this person, for the question, is that somehow the purification process didn't didn't somehow come in at some original point in the process. The purification didn't really eliminate all of those aspects or expressions that weren't insufficient to reflect being. And as a result, something got integrated with the nervous system that probably shouldn't have been there. It doesn't mean that on the next round, that you could say corruption, you could call it corruption. The PTSD is like that. It's like something that gets stuck in the nervous system. And then every time the cycle of creation repeats itself within the person, that PTSD element just gets even more integrated. The next path, the next time through the path. Definitely behind that, there's a feeling of protection. Like, oh, well, I need this to protect myself. Here's where a broader perspective comes in handy. In the broader perspective, some things are appropriate and correct and need to be there at the present moment or in the short term. But when the laws of nature change, then it doesn't need to be there. And so some element of flexibility needs to be built into the system to accommodate those structures that are kind of integrated and stuck in the system. Oh, I think war is a good example, isn't it? War has been around in the human collective for tens of thousands of years, maybe more. And surely, whatever goals or visions or desires a country or a leader has could be accomplished without massive loss of life and destruction, right? Right? If the leader of a country says, hey, a lot of my people are living in your country, and I think like we need to coordinate here so that we're sharing more culture, we're sharing more resources, we're really there's some kind of nice exchange going on because we're really from the same stock, something like that. Whatever that deepest desire, that divine intention to be closer, it could be accomplished a better way. But it's been stuck in the system for tens of thousands of years. And thanks to the internet, and thanks to the open flow of information, cell phones and stuff, the whole world is looking at this thing and going, there's got to be a better way. So just feeling that purification, so that you could say that there are elements of corruption that have been stuck in the system collectively or also individually in the case of PTSD for a really, really long time. Maybe for the whole lifetime, or maybe even for multiple lifetimes. If a soul has been through traumatic experiences, wars that have been going on for more than, for several 10,000s of years, could be some stress that's stuck there in the system that needs to be purified out, or the system has to develop a means to accommodate that type of form. Like when you're in a war, you probably need to function one way, and when you're in a time of peace, you need to function a completely different way. So the principle here is how to bring enough adaptability and stability into the nervous system so that when the time of war is done, the individual can go back to a more peaceful way of functioning, a more stress-free way of functioning. I'm just looking at it. I sometimes close my eyes when I look. Oh yes, it's on the integration stroke of the cycle of evolution. There it is, the integration stroke. So what I'm understanding is that sometimes what seems like a sort of corruption gets into the cycle because something that maybe should have been purified out doesn't get purified out. But there's usually a reason for it, because everything that shows up in this creation shows up for a reason. It's not created by us, it's created by the divine. Even things we think are created by us are still created by the divine through us, as us. So there's a reason for it, but it, like on the temporary. But then it gets integrated. And as I've talked before about like building up little paper thin layers of integration in the nervous system, after a while, the nervous system kind of grows around that. It accommodates it. But consciousness moves with infinite speed. So even if the nervous system has built up and sort of accommodated some stressful behavior, like being triggered by a certain kind of environmental input or something, consciousness has both power and speed and should be able to dig into that area. I'm identifying the seed of PTSD like a sort of a sick feeling. Like really, when I look at it, it's like a sick feeling deep in like the pit of your stomach, kind of like really sick feeling, really sick. And it's connected to having that feeling in such a large amount that it overwhelms the system. And there's a feeling of, oh, I don't have the resources to deal with this. So that's what I'm finding. That's how I'm identifying the seed at this kind of very subtle causal level of the physiology as a feeling, an energy signature. So we're just gonna, and that sick feeling is very, very intimately connected to this little thread of darkness that's in the heart of most people. It's a kind of identifying feature of this time period of the history of humanity that we're in, that I sometimes refer to Solzhenitsyn, and I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. I'm saying it American style. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote the Gulag Archipelago and is widely quoted for the insights that he got living through that hell. The line between good and evil runs through the heart, runs down the middle of the heart of every man, something like that. That line, it hurts. That line hurts. And it has that same kind of like a horrible, sick feeling in it as the seed of PTSD. We just offer it. We just look at the seed, and then we just release awareness into the heart of creation, into the soul of creation, into the source of creation. Eternal, unmanifest, absolutely life-supporting, wonderful, infinite resource of all healing energies and all good. And what's coming out of that is a wise expression of one's own self, one's future self, having traversed this journey through the PTSD and gotten out at the other end, and being soaked in the specific energy frequency that counterbalances that seed, which is that sick feeling. And when I look at the light medicine, or that quality of consciousness that counteracts that sick feelings, that seed, what I see is something that's very angelic, very soft, very heavenly, very sweet, very, very sweet, very gentle, very light, peaceful energy. And yet it's applied with a sort of deep wisdom, right? It's applied not in a kind of namby-pamby sort of way, but in a in a very kind of decisive and clear and powerful, even in a powerful way, because that sick feeling needs that level of sort of decisive and concerted focus in order to kind of like to be able to honor it. If it comes in like too soft and too like, oh, excuse me, I'm trying to help you, but I don't really want to do anything that's going to upset anybody, something like that, that it doesn't work. It has to be like there's also a kind of decisiveness about it. It's like the different aspects of the love of mother, right? That mother can be very fierce and protective of her child, but she can also be incredibly nurturing and incredibly sweet and incredibly full of wisdom and light. All these different aspects of the mother of creation. There's an energy signature there. It's kind of like a really heavenly energy signature. Very heavenly, very heavenly, very heavenly. It's a download. Everybody's receiving the download of that energy signature.